Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to PMI Live Friday. This afternoon's topic is organising for change, how to optimise your improvement. I'm Rich Seddon, and I'm in the host seat today. Heads up, folks, we have had one or two technical problems today, but so far we seem to be all here, which is great. And there's only one Alan in the room, which is even better. I'll explain that later on. I'm also joined by Warren, who many of you will know, and I'll ask our fantastic panel to introduce themselves very shortly. For those of you familiar with PMI Live, as the name suggests, it's a live experience. So as usual, we're trying something out that we haven't done before, which is asking you to contribute to the questions that are going to be put to our panel. So before I do that, and before I ask the guys to introduce themselves, let me give you a bit of a pitch as to why this topic and why now. As you know, we gather our topics for PMI Live from two main sources. One is the feedback that both participants of these sessions give us, and also all of our training delegates give us through our Voice of the Customer surveys. And the second is from our consulting practice. So in our consulting practice, we're exposed to a very wide range of industries, sectors, client environments. And one of the most common recurring questions we get is, how should we structure this change program? How should we structure this thing, this object? Sometimes it's, what should we do with our budget? Right down to that level of detail. But we're lifting this above projects at this point. That's the one in December where we're talking project. Today, we're talking about the architecture of change. So the roles, the structures, some of the methods that we're interested in here. And the panel have joined me to share their insight, their experience, and we're going to ban this around between us. Thank you at this point to everyone who has already submitted questions. We're going to give you a second round very shortly with an interactive whiteboard to give us some more discussion points. As ever, we're using the Q&A functions in here as well. So if you have got any comments, observations, keep us all on our toes. It is Friday afternoon. I'm wearing a tie. No one's entirely sure why. So just keep it coming and keep this thing as live and interactive as possible. So Neil, my glamorous assistant, will now put into the chat for everyone that's on the live stream, that's in the live webinar session, a link to Miro, the interactive whiteboard, and also a password, which is in the chat. If you have joined us on one of the live streams, you can still register. Hop over to pmi.co.uk/webinars, register, join us, get in here, and you can join the whiteboards. So let me share my screen once more, and we should have the discussion board. Good news, I can see that is already working, Neil. So people have got in, which is a further sign of success for this afternoon. Okay, so there are 4 topics we're talking about today. Within the context of this architecture of change. First is sponsorship and engagement. Second is effective communication. Third is optimal structures. And then the fourth is really less of a question, more of a commentary around our panel's advice and experience and insights on how to achieve the best results. So we've got some more scintillating music for you. I'm going to give you 4 minutes, 1 minute per question. Double click on a post-it to add your questions, your comments, your observations. Don't leave us hanging, folks. Go for it. I can see there's lots of people in there already. There are also our pre-populated questions are also in there. So double click on a post-it. 1 point per post-it to make my life easier would be fantastic. So thanks, folks. So let's have a quick look before we jump into this discussion. So the question 1 is around, point 1 is around sponsorship and engagement. Why are these elements, i.e. sponsorship and engagement, necessary, and how can they be secured? So some of the questions and comments we've got in the arena here are, I have a difficult sponsor. Does anyone have a similar experience? We won't take a poll on that one. My exec team are very interested in results, but rarely the process. I'm proposing to get there. Sponsorship and engagement is usually well formed and active at the start of a project, How has the panel ensured ongoing engagement and sponsorship during the role? How can this be built into objectives? Important to build trust relationships when working together. How best to engage with large groups of students, etc. So I'm going to stop screen sharing now, providing I can find what Zoom has done with the link, which will be somewhere, no doubt. How about, no, I'm still screen sharing, aren't I? Okay, so let me kick off the discussion whilst I try and find that button that seems to have disappeared. The first question then, Alan, to you. What's your experience of sponsorship and engagement, and what's your response to some of these questions that are coming in?
So hi Rich, so hi everyone, thanks for having me here first of all.
Right. Alan, and I'm really going to apologise for disturbing your flow. I've forgotten to introduce you guys, which you will just let me ride this one out. So as we go through to each of you, I'd ask you to introduce yourselves at that point, if that's okay. Yeah. Alan.
Sure, thanks.
What's your name and where do you come from?
So Alan Davey, and I'm based in Glasgow, as you maybe can tell from the accent, so I will try and speak quite slowly, depending, I'm sure that'll help for those outside of the west of Scotland. So yeah, my role, I am the Senior Manager for Continuous Improvement in KPMG's Business Services, KBS, it's called KPMG Business Services. So my role focuses mainly on internal processes within KPMG. We look after and we try and improve all the processes within our internal functions for our 16,000 plus UK colleagues, trying to improve their employee experience. So that's everything from facilities to finance to even down to things like our creative teams, and all that kind of stuff. So that's my role. We've got quite a broad spectrum. I've been doing process improvement and business change for about 15 years now in various different guises. So
cheers, Alan. Great to have you with us.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation. And I think, this topic is, wow, I mean, where do you even start with it? I'll probably start with the sponsorship one, if that's okay, just because something that I've learned personally in my career is that, the role of a sponsor is so important. And I don't think quite often what I've found is that people don't realize it's an active role. I think it's seen too often to be a kind of a tick in the box to say, yeah, go ahead and do the work and then come back and tell me when it's done. And I think one of the comments that's on there is quite, quite sort of aligned to that feeling that, it's like they're interested in results and they're interested in, but not really in the method. Well, my view is, a really good sponsor, look, it varies depending on the size of the change. I think that's probably something, as I've thought about this, my personal view is a lot of the answers to these questions varies depending on the kind of scope and size of what you're actually trying to change and deliver. Yeah. But broadly speaking, I personally feel like a sponsor has to be actively involved. And I think that your role, and when I say you, what I'm basing that on is if you or we are the people who are driving and leading the change, your role is to make sure that you get that sponsor engaged and informed from the get-go about what is their role on that project. And so it's about managing up. A lot of the time that sponsor is going to be more senior than you, but it's about making sure you set those clear expectations. Where I've seen it work really well is when a project kicks off and we say to the person who's sponsoring, and it's easier in a smaller project, of course, but where it works really well is when at the start you say, okay, to the sponsor, this is your role, this is what I expect you to do. And that quite often comes as a shock to a sponsor. They think it's because of them saying, yeah, go ahead, do it, you have my blessing, and I'll just, take a back seat now. And what I think it's part of, and we'll come on and talk a little bit later on about, optimal structures. But I think that, making sure that you've got that role clear for the sponsor, making sure that you're letting them know, hey, you have a part to play in this. It's not just a case of, giving the blessing and then sitting back. So that's my initial thoughts, Rich. I think that the role of the sponsor is one that we need to, that is most successful. And it's hugely important because they're the person who's giving you the mandate, but they need to be seen to be buying into whatever you're trying to change as well. That's the critical part.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Cheers, Alan. Mark, can I come to you next on that? So first ask you to introduce yourself to the audience, Mark, if that's all right, and then kind of your response on this first question, the sponsorship and engagement.
Sure. Afternoon, everyone. I'm Mark Birmingham. I'm currently Head of Strategy and Implementation at an organisation called the Kennel Club, a not-for-profit organisation active in a range of different things around dogs, unsurprisingly. My background is kind of strategy and implementation and change in a range of organisations across the not-for-profit and public sector. And so I guess for me, this kind of area, this sponsorship and engagement is absolutely critical. And I think some of the lessons I've learned where things haven't gone so well, quite a lot of the issues can be traced back to poor buy-in and sponsorship. Really agree with Alan. I think sponsors don't necessarily know that that's a specific active role. So one of the things I found that if you need to establish a trusting relationship to be able to do it, but to keep offering bits of kind of check-in and coaching with sponsors about how the role is going. Is there anything else they need? And that dynamic can be quite tricky if your sponsor's really senior. But if you kind of couch it in this is my technical competence, so how can I support you to do a good job? You can kind of get it to go down quite well. But I do think that's important. I think for me, broadly, the securing engagement part, it kind of depends whether that's at a sponsorship level or a delivery level. And the kind of I suppose the phrase I always have in my head somewhere is, how can I get people to have skin in the game as part of this and not just be passive kind of participants in it? And from a sponsor level, that can be things like really getting them to specify the desired outcomes rather than necessarily the how. So things like benefit mapping, blueprint, that kind of stuff where they're saying, oh, wouldn't it be great if we were? And then they have some kind of vested interest in then talking about that good future. And then for the people kind of more involved in the delivery and shaping of the change, it's more about how might that implementation be as successful as possible. So I think finding the right way, taking into account people's knowledge and experience that they can be inputting into the how and what it looks like, is a good way to kind of get that skin in the game. And final kind of tip for me, which works quite well, if you can get someone to stand up in front of a group of peers and claim that thing as theirs, particularly claim the outcome as something they're driving, it's quite hard to go back on that later on. So tactically, that can be quite useful.
Okay, brilliant. Cheers, Mark. Will, can I come to you with the same point as well and just ask you to introduce yourself briefly as well?
Sure, yeah. Thanks, Rich. Hi, everyone. So my name is Will Goodin. I work at OVO. So we are a leading energy supplier within the UK, very much committed to working towards a future of kind of decarbonisation and energy efficiency. We have a really ambitious kind of growth and change agenda, and that's kind of where I come in. So got a bit of a dual purpose role at the moment. So my kind of official title is chapter practice lead. So I lead a team of kind of really experienced change practitioners, chapter leads that are accountable for defining and enabling transformation across the key parts of the customer journey. I'm also then part of a wider team that is very much kind of focused on taking that kind of fantastic capability that we built out and almost flipping it on its side and creating a cross-functional, goal-aligned, value stream-led way of transforming the way that we work. So I'm leading on the delivery of the very first piece in that puzzle at the moment as we shift into that very new way of working. So all this stuff is front and center of my mind at the moment, working on a lot of this stuff. So to come back onto this point here, so yeah, I guess, I mean, I've worked in the kind of CI game now for kind of just over a decade. I think we've all got our battle scars from sponsors that have proved quite challenging and quite difficult. I think what I've learned to kind of question myself throughout kind of along those years is I try to put myself in the sponsor's shoes, and I try not to kind of create too much of a role for them. I try to think, at what point in the journey are they on? So I think I'm trying to adopt agility, and I'm trying to embed continuous improvement into the culture of the business. Not every senior leader is going to be as kind of au fait with those ways of working, and probably will have a lot of their own legacy behaviors and experiences that will dictate the way that they work and the decisions that they make, and the way in which they direct and guide their teams to deliver outcomes. And a lot of that you'll see in the day-to-day way that they deliver change. It's kind of like pack swarm mentality. I've seen a problem, I'll get my trusted advisors to swarm around it and just fix it, get something done. But when we're trying to deliver long-lasting, sustained change, and kind of create that environment where you can bring more people into the change environment, you can pivot more quickly, so you can practice agility, but you can also embed those principles of continuous improvement so we can continue delivering change after your change practitioners have gone. I really try to think about what journey they're on. Obviously, I live and breathe it every day, but these people may not. So it's about accepting that and then taking them on that journey. But there's also another piece that I'm really kind of I'm really interested in. It surrounds control. And I think sponsors are generally at a very senior level within the organization. They have a lot of control over their span. And when change comes into their part of the organization, a lot of that resistance that they start to feel is when they start to feel as if they're potentially losing some of that control. So part of my approach is to try to get them to relinquish that willingly, and almost say, trust the process, trust what we're trying to achieve, trust how we're going to achieve it, and start to work with them to relinquish an element of that control and essentially distribute that amongst their teams, because it's their teams that are going to be delivering the work, delivering the outcomes, and they're there to provide. They're the wayfinders, right? They're the people that are providing them with the direction, they're providing them with the guidance, and they can help with prioritization. That's what a really good sponsor's there for. But all the other stuff, making it happen, their team should be there doing that.
Okay, right. So some interest. I'm going to readjust the question slightly for you, Warren. I know you've had a long week, but I know you enjoy this kind of challenge on a Friday afternoon. So Warren, first of all, you introduce yourself, and then I'll throw the challenge at you.
Oh, thank you, Rich. Yeah, so good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Warren Knight. I'm a director consultant and head of strategy here at PMI. I work with a range of PMI's clients, from developing strategy through to final implementation. Yeah, that's me. I think I'll keep it short and sweet.
Okay, so bearing in mind the points that the guys have all made, then Warren, I've got themes coming out here about buy-in, skin in the game, cross-functional relationships, trust, and accountability. I didn't hear anyone mention governance, but we alluded to it several times. But we didn't hear anyone mention it by name, but we alluded to it. So here's an interesting observation that I'm going to make. See what you think of this and what your theories are, Warren. One of the things in our client work that we struggle with to engage clients in, so when we're designing a program, the thing that always gets the most challenge and pushback is the sponsor development line, i.e. be it training, the coaching, the mentoring for sponsors in their role. And I think, Alan, you made the point around that. I'm signing up at the front, my name's on the top of the charter, but I'm off ski. Now, bear in mind that's my experience, that's our experience, Warren. What are your thoughts on that, and why you think that is the case? And second part, why you think it's the case? Second, what do you think the problems that causes are?
Well, if I can answer the second part first,
I knew you would.
The problems it causes have been expressed already very eloquently. I think traditionally it's perceived as a sign of weakness. The higher up the organization you go, then in theory, the more experienced, the more skilled you are. And therefore, for some strange reason, the less development you require. However, the truth is, the further up you go the organization, and particularly when you are responsible for leading, an element of the organization, leading change in that organization, actually, for me, people who lead change often are the people who have to change the most. It's a unique skill set that has to be developed, it has to be honed. But I think that sort of very much goes against, or is contrary to classic traditional thinking about and perception of the executive, I'm afraid.
Yeah, indeed. And I think the busyness often gets in the way as well. But for me, it's about a reluctance to have the conversation in the first place with sponsors, that this isn't just another, this role is important. And the nature of it, I genuinely, I think you're right. People don't understand it, and they don't understand the value that they can deliver.
And I appreciate it's difficult because we're an external consultancy, so our dynamic often with senior managers is slightly different than if you are an internal consultant. But I think offering senior managers some kind of formulaic training course to go on probably is not the way. That being able to forge, as everybody's been saying, being able to forge that trust, being able to forge that relationship to be their trusted advisor, and to be able to stand alongside them and coach them as they lead the improvement program, I think probably, practically speaking, is a better option. I think it's more palatable for them. I think it's, you know, it provides a better viewpoint to the outside world. It's just whether you are internally positioned to be able to create such a relationship, you know, and we always need to work hard to do that.
Cool.
Rich, do you mind if sorry, do you mind if I just, I've got one
go
really
ahead.
quick point, if you don't mind, just, and I think we're all in absolute agreement around the importance of sponsorship. I just want to follow up on something that Will said around, which actually was something that crossed my mind when I was preparing and thinking about this question. And you mentioned, Will, about putting yourself in the sponsor's shoes. And I think that's a really, because look, why are we here? I guess most of the people who are listening to this conversation and, you know, are probably here trying to get some hints and tips on how could we approach it? Well, something that I would say, and you know, when I'm talking to my team, there's an element of salesmanship involved in change. There's no question about that. You're selling something. So if we take Will's point around put yourself in the sponsor's shoes, we're selling change, which, let's be honest, very few people actually want to go through the pain of that. So you have to focus on what's in it for them. The sponsor's role, we need to think about what's the sponsor's role. Their role is to do what's best for their organisation, for their part of the organisation. So the second part of this question was, how can we secure good sponsorship? And I think the way to secure good sponsorship is by focusing on what is this change going to deliver for that person? How is it going to make them and their team's lives better? How is it going to, what outcome is going to be there? Focus on that. Quite often we get caught up in the process, and it's like, here's my project plan, and here's what I'm going to do, and here's the, you know. And I think it's about when you put yourself in their shoes, what do they want to hear? They want to hear, this is the outcome that I'm going to deliver for you with your support and with your help.
Yeah.
And if you buy in and support me in this is what I'll do for you. And I think it's making sure that we kind of really approach it from that angle and think about it from their perspective. What do they want to hear? What are they signing up to? And then once you've got that, once you've sold them on that idea, then you're in a much stronger position to get their support.
Okay. So on the subject of selling and communications, then I was trying to segue that into the next question. I almost did it smoothly, didn't I? So effective communication. I mean, all of those things that we've just talked about there all have an element of communication with them. And when you think about all of these topics, they overlap a lot, clearly, and are not a linear journey. Mark, can I come to you around effective communication? Kind of interested here, and looking at the questions we're being asked, the good, the bad, and the ugly really would be really interesting from your experience.
Yeah, sure. So, of course, entirely appropriate to be focusing on communication engagement as a really important part of change, and the kind of the bedrock for it for me, particularly comms and engagement around change that's being planned or change that's underway, is to try and get as close to we're doing this change together as is realistic. Sometimes the change involves changes to roles or contraction, or so, without being kind of false about it, but trying to get as close to we're doing this together with appropriate roles and boundaries, rather than here's some communication about the change that's happening to you, which immediately kind of kills your opportunities for engagement. I think, and the kind of practical side, it's thinking about all the different channels that are already at your disposal in your organisation. There will be email, there'll be Yammer or equivalents, there'll be newsletters, there'll be intranets, all of that kind of stuff, which is just there. So for me, it's about it's consistency across those channels. So people aren't picking up things in one area, being contradicted in another, or the have you heard about, because something happened to be dropped through one method. So that consistency is really key. It really helps kind of tamp the keep a lid on the fear and the rumours and the worries about I don't know or I'm not sure what's going on. And then specifically kind of around where there's peaks of change, where you need to be warming up or announcing or kind of decompressing from something, using face-to-face ways of doing it as much as is feasible for your environment. And kind of my experience is the smaller you can make those groups, the better. because people are much more likely to be able to talk about what they're really thinking, what they're really feeling, what they're really worried about. Doing a kind of big plenary, here's the roadshow, 500 people in the room, anyone got any questions? No, they do, but they're not going to come out in that kind of format. So thinking about the kind of space that you can create for people to be able to feed back, I think is really, really important for me. And then final bit for me, and it's kind of particularly relevant in my current context, but has been in other organizations as well. There's the messages you're putting out internally through whatever mechanism to your staff, but there's that all of that can be undone by something that comes in from outside. So someone put something in the previous one about involving suppliers and kind of other stakeholders. If you're in an organization, your organization says it's all going fine, and you speak to a contractor who's working on it and they're like, oh no, I've got a different impression, or something in the press or something in the media or something does the rounds, that can be really helpful, but also really, really destructive. And my kind of theory for why that's so powerful is it's seen as objective. So if you as the organization are telling your people, everyone's always taking that with some degree of a pinch of salt. Whereas if something comes from the outside, whether it's in press or industry press or whatever it is, that carries enormous weight. And if it's supportive, even if it's critical, that can be incredibly helpful. But that's the kind of bit where people suddenly, that trust you've built up of I'm getting a real picture can disappear really quickly if something comes in from outside.
Okay. Will, I know you guys at OVO put a lot of energy into this area. What kind of methods are you using?
Well, there's a number. So I think you touched on things like looking at the good, bad, and the ugly. And I think for me, one of my kind of big rules is when we do things like planning. So when we're kind of bringing larger groups of people together and we want to start to forge a roadmap for whatever it be, 3, 6, 9, 12 months. That has to be face to face, and that's even at the expense of people not being able to be there and missing key stakeholders. Because I think getting in front of people and creating connection and almost then instilling purpose, and they understand the role they're going to play in this change vehicle, and they understand the value that they're going to bring to life. I think that's absolutely critical. So for me, that's kind of number one rule: face to face when you plan. When we're then starting to kind of dive into the realms of progress updates, one of my other rules is just maximum visibility. So I'll maximize any channel that's available to me. And I'm not necessarily, although I will pay attention to the messages being conveyed, I will try my very best to appeal to the masses. So create maximum visibility. I will not sugarcoat the message. It's important to create trust, and I think accountability around that as well. We don't want to I don't want to mess around with creating subliminal messages with change. If it's not going well, you need to share that. And you need to share that broadly, and then get people to understand it's not always going to go well. And it's something that I'm really comfortable talking about with my team and with the wider group that I work with. There's no real golden ticket for it. I think one of the things I try to apply as well is I don't know if anyone's read about the law of diffusion of innovation. So if you want to get, there's this kind of social phenomenon when you're looking at your early adopter. Everyone's heard of the early adopters, your champions for change, the innovators, the small minority of the organization that you're working within that really want to buy into your idea, that really want to get involved in it. They're the people that I want kind of straight away coming to me. So my maximum visibility approach is directed straight at them. Everyone else, for me, that message diffuses and that change diffuses throughout time, and they start to believe it more and more. And like I said, we start to create that connection and trust, and I win them over in the long game. But for me, it's maximum visibility, far and wide.
Okay. So on that subject of visibility, Alan, I know in KBS you guys have done a lot of focusing on the two-way nature of the communication as well, go down and up and out. What's it like for you guys in the kind of service sector that you're in?
I think it's probably the same sort of challenges as most other places right now. I think, it's interesting listening to the guys talking about, face to face and these things. I think, let's be honest, the world's changed completely around communication in the last 2 years, and we're all probably still adjusting to that and finding the right ways to do it. I fully agree. Face to face is always the best way, because we all know the kind of rules around communication. It's always better when you can see people's full body language, etc. And you guys are running a training course for us actually face to face today in Watford for the first time, Rich. Actually.
We are indeed.
And I've had great feedback from the team on that to see how well that's going compared to virtual. So I think we're all in furious agreement about face-to-face being the best way. Challenges we face, though, are I think we touched on the channels. You know, I think there's a huge amount of communication channels now, and it's finding the right ones. So, you know, I log on in a day and I've got Teams, I've got countless Teams channels that I'm part of now. You've got your emails, you've got, you know, individual chats going on, you've got your mobile phone, you've got WhatsApp, you've got all sorts of different things going on, and it's finding the right channel. I think that's the challenge that I'm struggling, and I'm going to be honest, struggling with right now when we're talking about effective communication, is what's the right way to communicate that I trust and have confidence that this message is going to reach the right people. They're going to read it, or they're going to at least understand it and take it on board. And I think that's the big challenge right now, because there's just so many communication channels that are at our disposal.
And the automation of some of them is a double-edged sword as well. Automated feedback on dashboards and all that kind of stuff around change programs and of any variety, of even process management and daily process management.
It's as Alan said as well, isn't it? Now we've got following COVID, and now everyone's kind of pivoted to remote working. It's not just email anymore, is it? You've got instant message, which everyone's now kind of stepping into. So you've got that as a channel. You've got email. People dive into remote village halls where you've got 100 people on a call. I mean, again, really good ways of doing it. People are now practicing more agile ways of working. So you've got stand-ups here and there. You've got 4 of them in the morning. There's so many avenues that you can pivot communication into. It's almost impossible to figure out how you're going to get maximum kind of readership, retention, and then actual application on the back of it. Are they actually going to do something? Am I creating value by giving someone through that channel that piece of communication?
My 2 things that I'm doing right now, just to really be succinct and bring it to a kind of point on the question, the 2 things that I'm trying to do more of right now, and look, I'm quite old school, so it's difficult, it's challenging trying to learn a new way of doing things, right? But the 2 things I'm doing from a change perspective is, this is one that will never go away, having a plan, having a communication plan when you're doing a change. Too many times people don't have a plan of who am I going to tell, and it all boils down to the same old basics. Who am I going to tell? What am I going to tell them? When am I going to tell them it? Why do they need to know it? That plan is absolutely that should always be the bedrock of any kind of effective communication when you're delivering a change, right? This is a bit specifically around change. Who are my target audience? What do I need to tell them, when and how? And then the second thing that I'm trying to be is more creative. We're also living in a world where people are, spending a lot of time on TikTok, and I don't want to sound like an old man here, but there's the way that people consume information now is changing, right? So it's easy to go into the old methods of, but I sent an email, or I did, something. That's not always the most effective way of communicating now, and also technology's moving on, and we've got far more opportunities and ways of communicating at our disposal. So I'm trying to be more creative in how I communicate. I find that short, sharp videos, you can say more in a 30-second video than you can in a 2-page long document, PowerPoint or whatever. So that's the 2 things that I'm trying to focus on: having a plan and being more creative.
Yeah, and I think I'd completely agree with that. So our advice to our clients is email's the last resort these days. Absolute last resort. No one in the history of ever needs any more emails in their lives. That said, having the use of things like Teams that you've talked about, a central repository where people know they can go and find stuff when they need to know it, can help reinforce that. And video, absolutely. And if reflecting in our engagement with our audiences across all of our channels, video is the thing that people respond to best. Everyone's got one of these in their hands that can all you can do stuff pretty succinctly. That doesn't mean it necessarily needs to involve dancing, thankfully.
Can I just add a point? I think it kind of supports everything which is said, but the word communication, the genesis of that comes from community, and I think community it's about making contact, isn't it? And it's about having discussion, and it's about having dialogue. You can't expect people to make connection, engage with what you're doing if you're telling them stuff. You have to allow them to explore it. You have to allow them to discuss it. Otherwise they'll never get the ownership for it, because they haven't made contact with it. They haven't experienced it. And for me, it's what's interesting when I step back and sum this up. I'm yet to find a way of communicating which is both extremely efficient and extremely effective. They seem to just, in this area, seem to be sort of almost polar opposite. But if we can find that magic bullet. Just one more point about some of the questions on here. I always encourage my clients to think about communication as the ebb and flow of the tides. Okay, we go out, we engage, we communicate, we come back in, we make sense of that. We go back out to the community, we play back what we think we've heard. We ask the question, is that right? Do we have the right theory? Is there anything else you would add to that? We come back in, we make sense. We go back out and we play it back again every time we've got new information, so that they're constantly part of this and being engaged. It takes a lot more effort, but it's obviously worth it in the long term.
So on the subject of effort, let's talk about structures, Warren, whilst we've got you. So the things that are coming out here are questions that we come across reassuringly quite often around centralization or decentralization. Who decides what the priorities are? We end up fighting there from one of the questions. Should change agents be centralized in my business? Do you recommend dedicated PMO resorts? What's better, project or program? Improvement specialists who know how to use all the techniques required. Is there a common structure you'd recommend? Now, it's fair to say we've been involved in everything from massive centralized programs of improvement with large central teams where everything needs to be funneled through the central team, through to the leanest of lean, decentralized, dispersed. Health warning here, there is no one better way. So Warren, it depends on the context. So Warren, how would you tackle some of these questions and challenges that people face when making a choice between structures and how to structure their improvement program?
I think whether the improvement specialist or expertise is centrally held or locally held, is not so much for me the question. The question is about what resultant skills and capability are you going to leave in that area to be able to A, sustain, and B, continuously improve what has been created. And actually, probably to sustain it, you have to improve it. It's a bit like riding a bike. So it's not just locking it in, it's the continuous improvement side. Now, if that's best done by having that central dedicated resource that can make the time to support, to educate, to facilitate, to coach, and so that the local organization is able to take the change on and the skills associated with that, happy days. Okay. If it's local, it's local. But that for me isn't the issue. It's the focus.
Cool. Will, I've picked up on, thanks Warren, I've picked up on the also one of the questions. There's a point around labels and descriptors. I know you guys are quite strong on this in some of the agile language that you guys use. Can you just give us an insight into that and how that works for you?
Yeah. So I think we've definitely tried a bit of a blended approach. I mean, we've at an operational level, we want to try and kind of deploy kind of squad mentality, so almost kind of create squads that will handle certain cohorts of customers. At a change level, it's a little bit different, and I think in our environment, and something that I kind of can buy into as well, we have essentially a decentralized and a decentralized element. They're coexisting. So I think it's really important that you have whatever you want to call it, a traditionalist kind of approach to program project, and having that capability stood up to be able to go and pivot into large scale enterprise change that will kind of cut across the entire swathes of the business, particularly if you're in a regulatory environment as well. I think that thing is quite important. But where we've started stepping into some of that other terminology, we're creating at the moment kind of a slightly, I guess we're still technically centralized, part of a centralized team, but we are immersed in the organizations. We are creating capabilities from within each part of the organization, and that's that value stream led approach. So we are, and that will have your delivery leads, your scrum masters, so your kind of agile coaches, your chapter leads that I work with, that are kind of really driving what needs to happen in those value streams as well. So what we're creating within those value streams are end-to-end visibility. So you are flipping everything on its side horizontally, and you are giving people a picture of where do I sit in the enterprise value stream end to end. And then we are creating delivery capabilities that actually that cut across all of those functions. So we're not functionally working anymore. But that's a process, and that's something that we quite literally have just started, and it's a big learning journey, as we talked about right at the start around kind of sponsorship. That trickles through to the rest of the business as well. I mean, there's a lot of people with entrenched thinking that potentially will look at things like tribes and squads and scrums and think, oh, there's some dirty words that I'm not really too clear on just yet. But what it means that you take the terminology away, what all we're doing is creating cross-functional, goal-aligned teams. And where we're aligning to is business strategy, and we see that trickle down to a functional level, and we just create connection across all of those functions. That is in essence what you're trying to do. So I tend to steer away as best as I can from the terminology. It goes to the same when you're deploying like lean programs as well. You want to steer away from going, oh, let's take you in and kind of teach you to green belt level. An operational manager might not even understand what level that pitch is at. And they may think, oh, that works for me. But then they haven't sat there and then fully understood whether, is that something that I can live and breathe alongside my day-to-day role? Probably not. So we think about more, what are the basic kind of continuous improvement kind of mindset, what mindset elements do we need to teach? How do we want to create that culture for continuous improvement, create agility, and what kind of basic problem solving skills do we want to give in-house across the business? But yeah, like I said, I tend to do away with the labels.
Good. Okay, cool. Thank you for that. It's really interesting. So one of the things Will touched on there was about ownership and operationalizing. So once the change people, improvement people have departed, I'm elaborating. Alan, from your experience in terms of going beyond just the project or the initiative at the time, how do you find that, and how effective are you operationalizing and maintaining the improvements?
So where I've found it works really well is when there's an ongoing relationship with the team, but that's not always the case, I understand. But let me share my personal experiences that I've worked in teams where I have been a dedicated kind of person who works with an operational team as a process improvement or continuous improvement person. And that then, what helps there is that you're kind of permanently, you're always there. There's always someone that they can refer to, and you're always there kind of making sure that the changes have been embedded. That's not realistic everywhere, and it's not always going to be the case. In some cases, you are going to be in and out. And that's when I think it's down to, well, look, every project methodology has some element in it that talks about that final phase, about making sure that things are embedded, right? So in a domain project, it's the control phase and making sure that things are actually going to keep working. And I think that quite often what happens is we get to the kind of implementation as change people, and we sort of go, right, that's it, it's in, and then we maybe are a little bit guilty of sort of going, deep breath, that's it, it went, whatever the technology went in or whatever, the process changed, and that's it. So, look, I think that what I would say here, Rich, is that it's a mindset of making sure that we really do make sure we don't walk away until we see it working well. We're doing a lot of kind of, for example, right now we're doing a lot of small tech automation, like RPA type work in across KBS and KPMG, and we've built in we had a sort of initially, like we've got a kind of 4-phase approach to it, around kind of information gathering, building, testing, deployment. But we've got a 5th phase, which is just, and nobody will be surprised to hear this, which is hypercare. We don't walk away until that process is run 3-4 times and we're happy that it's actually working the way it should. And some of those processes are quarterly processes, so it means that we're hanging around for a year, right? Just making sure that it works. That's the only way that I think you can really be confident that it's actually landed well and that it's working the way that it should. That's my view. Cool.
Okay, thanks. So moving into topic 4, Mark, can I come to you on this one? So what we're thinking about here is your insight and advice and experience on how to achieve the best results. What are your thoughts on this one?
So I think I'm going to kind of focus on a people and behaviour kind of perspective on this, and I think there was a question in there about biggest pitfall, which I think is a nice way of flipping it around. And I think for me, one of the biggest pitfalls in trying to change and improve anything, whether it's small or kind of large scale transformation and organisation, is forgetting or not paying enough attention to the fact that essentially most of what you're doing is changing behaviour. Yes, you're going to change roles, responsibilities and bits of kit and all that kind of stuff as well. It's really important. But the bedrock is you are trying to change the way that people behave. And to be able to do that effectively, needing to really think about what helps people change their behaviour. So they need to have the capability bit is quite easy. Like, do people know what to do? Have we written the new process down? All that kind of stuff. That kind of gets dealt with quite a lot, I think. Motivation, I think, does get thought about, but maybe not enough. In my experience, not enough attention is always kind of paid to that. The bit that I think gets missed in the kind of simple behaviour change model is around making sure people have the opportunity to change their behaviour. Have they got the time? Have they got the mental resilience? Have they got all the things that are actually needed, rather than just telling people this is how it needs to be, so now you know, and I'm going to motivate you, because if you don't, there's some kind of negative consequence of not doing it. But I just think that kind of rounded way of thinking about the kind of behaviour change that sits at the core of most organisational change or transformations is kind of really important from my point of view. And then to kind of link two other points, just link that quickly. One is something that really helps with that is feedback on how change, for me, is feedback on how the change or changes are landing with people, not the kind of step by step have the things happened, but how are people actually feeling about the process, the new world, the doing things differently, because that can give, I think, a really helpful read on, are there bits of that kind of puzzle that are missing? Everyone knows what to do, but they're still not doing it, because why not? Why hasn't it landed? Why hasn't it resonated? And something that can help with that, and obviously it depends on the change and on your organisation, is being able to share examples of a team, a process, part of the organisation that has successfully changed. So if you've kind of got a branch structure, it's great. You pick a really good branch, you do a nice pilot with them, and then you go, look, it's brilliant. And if you can get to a point of where other parts of the organisation are starting to experience a bit of FOMO, a bit of fear of missing out, that can be a really helpful kind of incentive as well. So lots of other stuff, but I thought would be, from my point of view, that behaviour bit's really important.
No, great. Cheers, Mark. Warren, your response on that? Your thoughts on this one, I should say.
No, I absolutely agree. I mean, I think the thinking and behaviours are fundamental, because it drives the action that we're going to take. And so I agree with Mark. Sort of generally, sort of skills and knowledge type capability building can be pretty straightforward. The kind of building the right attitude and mindset and the right kind of behaviours, I think that's more of a challenge. I don't think it can necessarily be sort of trained in, one course and it's done. So linking up on some of the other things mentioned about, being there for a period of time, like you're saying, Alan, walking alongside them, promoting the right behaviours in what you're doing is important.
Thanks, Warren. Will, can I come to you with this final question as well, please?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, did a little bit of kind of thinking on this, and I guess perhaps it resonates a little bit more with how myself and my team and the wider business will deliver change. But I guess I'm trying not to see it in terms of a fixed end point or a fixed start point. I try to think about it as more of a journey of transformation. And I almost don't see us as the people that are delivering the change. We're co-creating it and we're enabling it. And we will continue to be a kind of a supporting partner and part of that kind of broader kind of end-to-end way of transforming, until the confidence is there and the capability is there for us to be able to step away. So I guess it's almost about, I think a few people have called out on this call already, but almost kind of instilling the kind of thinking skills, the mindset for us to be able to kind of slightly step away and relinquish a little bit of that control ourselves and say, right, we've now created a change capability within the organization, and they can effectively continue to run this, but also then continue to shape, evolve, check, challenge it. The change cycle doesn't stop when we leave,
Yeah, great. Okay, thanks, Will. And finally, Alan, if I'd just ask you for the response on the making a difference point.
Yeah, so my views on this one are, I think obviously, like everything that the guys have said already, fully agree with. I think ultimately, and one of the questions on the Miro board there is around advice for dealing with pushback from employees who don't see the value of it, and that is where we can make a difference. And I think it goes back to probably touches slightly in my earlier points around, look, there's an element of salesmanship, but you can only sell something you believe in yourself. So it comes back to the why. For me, it always, look, with any change, it's the key question is, why are we doing this? Why is this happening? And if we can, as long as we understand that and we buy into that, and we can then try and reinforce that to people, it's about constantly remembering that. I think the thing that makes the biggest difference for me is, and as I say, it's not just about enforcing it to other people, it's about remembering it yourself. Why are we doing this? We get bogged down in the detail, we get bogged down in the process of change. The thing that makes a difference for me is remembering what is the end thing that we're actually going to deliver here. Why is we're going to make something better, presumably for someone. That's the thing to focus on, and I think that's the thing that can continue to make the difference. And I hope you can still see me. The sun's starting to go down up here in Scotland already, so it's. I've just noticed it's a bit dark in this room. So,
cool. Thanks, Alan. So I've been keeping a very informal little tick chart here. I think that the word journey has been mentioned by you guys 17 separate times through this conversation. No doubt someone's keeping a more accurate tally chart than I was. Which is interesting, isn't it? Because there's lots of old cliches around change being the journey, a journey, not an event. Yet so often we view it as a series of occasionally interlinked events. All of these, as I said earlier on, all of these topics link together on the journey of change, dare I say it. So guys, thank you very much for all of the questions that have come in from everyone that's participated. Thank you to our panel as well. Just before we close out, there's a couple of things I'd like to share with you. I'm sure it hasn't gone unnoticed that over the last couple of years, PMI has turned itself into something of a content powerhouse. Our latest piece of content, which we're really pleased with, has come out this week. And judging by the responses from our audiences, you guys are too. It's the Uncommon Sense podcast, brand new podcast, and it's called this, Tools for Improving Your Work Forever. The idea is it's 15 minutes. It's available as video and podcast on all the podcast services and our YouTube channels. As coming back to my original point about the amount of content we're putting out, the best place to find all of our content is on our Knowledge Hub. So you can follow us on LinkedIn, but if you go to our Knowledge Hub, which is at pmi.co.uk, top menu, all of our content, whether it's a podcast, webinar, this will be recorded, it'll all be published there. For you to find and use. So in terms of engaging people, these tools are there for you to use. Please do so, and also please feedback as you do so as well. Final thing is PMI Live next month. Yes, it is nearly December. We're not on the last Friday of the month next month due to decided no one wanted to come to this between Christmas and New Year. We're on Friday the 16th of December, 1500 UK time as normal. And we're talking about the layer down next. So we talked about programs today. Next week, the next time on the 16th is about projects. So how do you get the most from your improvement projects? We will be, Dennis Cromentine-Marsh, who many of you know, will be joining me on the 16th, and we very much look forward to seeing you then. So all that remains for me to say is thank you again to our panel. Thank you to everyone that has joined us, and wishing you a very happy and relaxing weekend. Thank you everyone for joining us.